Welcome back to the second part of working on this Tahoe. So we got some new parts in. It's a few days later. We got two front brake hoses like I mentioned in the first video. You know, I just don't trust them. And guys, I know there's another brake hose at the rear of the vehicle, but budget. That's all I can tell you, okay? And then we have a new master cylinder because I suspect the one that's on this truck is no good. And we can see an obvious leak coming out that seal. So I just went ahead and knocked out the brake hose on the front right side here off camera. You could see how nice and shiny this thing looks. There goes the old one sitting right there in the pan. And just a pro tip for you guys, when you're dealing with something like this, like the fitting on the brake line, and you got your 10 mil, you know, flare nut wrench, and it's not fitting, it fits a little bit too loose, the 9 mil doesn't fit, it's too tight, and you start to think, oh, it's just a rust, right? So you force it with the 10 mil, and what do you end up doing? Rounding off the fitting on the brake line here, which you're just opening up a can of worms for yourself at that point. So instead of doing that, just stop and think that maybe it's not even a metric, maybe it's a standard size. So that's where I pulled out the 3/8 flare nut wrench, and it fit the fitting perfectly. I was able to loosen it without damaging anything. But let's go over to the front left side and we'll record putting on that brake hose. All right, so I like to start up here where the hard line connects to the brake hose instead of at the caliper, because I want to break that connection and plug off the line to stop it from dripping. I'm going to use a little bit of brake parts cleaner right here. Start cleaning things. That just makes it a little bit easier to see what you're working with. And you could even clean some of that rust off of the fittings. Give it another spray of brake parts cleaner. Like I told you guys, the front right side was a 3/8. This side is not a 3/8, guys. It's very clear that these brake lines have been replaced. And honestly, it's pretty obvious because if you look at the routing of these lines, they're all just janky and, you know, they just did whatever they could. So this is not a 3/8. It is larger than that. Let me try to figure out what size it is. This fitting is larger than a 13 mil and smaller than a 14 mil. So if you go over to standard, that's going to be 9/16 and 1/2 inch. And I tried both of them. The 1/2 inch doesn't even want to go over the fitting, and the 9/16 goes over the fitting. But I mean, look at all that play. That's not a snug fit. So I can't figure out, you know, what fitting this is. So I'm going to spray it down with some penetrating fluid, even though it's not going to do crap, but makes me feel a little bit better. Let's try the 9/16 and see if it'll break free, and hopefully we don't round anything off. Ugh. Oh, guys, I don't like it. Of course, the one I decide to record is the one that turns out to be a nightmare. So I'm going to try metric. Got my flare nut 14 mil. You can see we have just as much play as when we're using the standard wrenches. Ugh. I have to pull out the torch. Oh man, what a mess. Oh my god, it's like this thing is like crazy glued in place. And I'm here like moving the rubber hose, and this feels like real crunchy under here. Like there's rust, a lot of rust. Let's see if we can pull this back. Definitely. And it's these little rubber sleeves that they sit right here, right on the end of this metal crimp. They retain water, and it's what causes these things to usually fail, like right here. The reason why I'm moving the rubber out of the way is because I actually want to heat up this side of the metal, not so much the actual fitting on the hard brake line. I think I want to go ahead and cut the rubber hose off right here, only because my fear of heating this thing up too much is that the rubber gives out, and then I just have hot boiling brake fluid just spray right at my face once it kind of like explodes. This is a much safer option. Oh my goodness. All right, so we got a plan B. Let's go ahead and get off the retainer clip. We'll push the brake line through the bracket because I'm going to try to retain the brake line fitting from the back side. And you can see there's flats along this side right here. And since I cut the hose off already, I have access to put a impact on here. And let's just cross our fingers that it goes well. Okay, as you can see, we pulled the entire line through the bracket, just as I was expecting. All right, so I'm going to try my Knipex pliers right here to try to not damage the fitting. I don't got much faith in this thing simply on how tight it is, but we're going to try this first before going over to the vice grips. There you have it, guys. How's that saying go? There's more than one way to skin a cat. There sure is. So what I'm going to do right now is with a wire brush on my drill, I like to clean up the threads. Clean it off with some brake parts cleaner. Clean all this area. I found this little rubber plug and it fits perfectly right here on the line, and we can finally stop our brake fluid drip. Like I said, the vice grip would be last resort, but we all know that would just chew up the fitting. But this thing has flat jaws on it, so it doesn't bite into anything, but it gets a very good grip on whatever you're trying to hold. The part number for this is a Knipex 8603250. Now with all of that garbage taken care of, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the bolt from the back of the caliper holding on the line. This is just gonna be a 11 mil. Now we are gonna have to reuse the bolt, the banjo bolt, because the new brake lines do not come with it. So I got that copper washer off of it, and if you look closely, you can see there's like a lip of rust all the way around. That's what I want to try to remove, because that can actually interfere with the sealing surface and you'll be fighting a constant drip. So I'm all done cleaning it, and hopefully you guys can see the difference of cleaning that rust off. And the rust that we just cleaned off of the bolt, you're gonna have the same exact problem on the back side of the caliper where it's supposed to seal. So I like to just use a wire wheel on the drill right here and clean up that sealing surface. And after the wire wheel and a little bit of brake parts cleaner, you could see how clean the sealing surface looks compared to everything else around it. You want to make sure you put all of this stuff on as clean as possible, even if you have to hit the new parts with some brake parts cleaner. You don't want any like little contaminants of dirt or like little chunks of rust falling on that sealing surface. All right, so now we could take our little plug off and it's gonna start dripping, but that's fine. Spray this with brake parts cleaner just to make sure there's no dirt or debris on the sealing surface. All right, so the threads are started and that's all I wanted. Now we could go ahead and push it through the hole. Now this line does have to slot into the bracket a specific way. That's the only way it's gonna fit in. You can tell when you're in all the way because it actually becomes flush right around the bracket. Now that I got both of my connections all torqued down, I'm gonna go ahead and open this up and we should see air come out of here. Now, of course, this doesn't really matter because we're not trying to bleed the system right now. We still gotta replace the master cylinder. I'm just trying to get whatever air I can out of the system. See the air bubbles? And I'm just gonna keep doing that until no more air is coming out of it and it's just a constant stream of brake fluid. So both of the brake lines are technically done, and they took a lot longer than I was expecting because of this side. The other side went pretty smooth. So I got my vacuum pump right here. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it right into here and start sucking out whatever fluid we can. Something I just noticed too is these lines are different diameters. This one right here is a much smaller one. I don't know if you guys can see that, but this is a very large brake line. It's kind of uncommon. Seems like a 15 mil 60 is pretty decent. Just gonna break them free with a ratchet. Oh god, they're tight. Oh wow. Oh wow. I need a bigger ratchet. All right, so that bracket could just hang out right there. It's not gonna go anywhere. And now it's time to prime up the new master cylinder with brand new brake fluid. I'm not a big fan of this really because I've never really gotten it to work all that great in my favor. You know, there's still going to be air in the system. You still have to bleed the system properly, but I suppose it does help. It's the only reason why I do it, even though I think it's not as effective as people think it is. So anyway, got some brand new brake fluid right here. You can see we still have the caps or the plugs on this side. I'm not going to pour a lot, guys, because I don't want to be making a mess in here while I'm trying to install this thing. So a little bit of brake fluid, and I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the little caps off of the sides right here. Let's see if we get any fluid start to leak out. Nope, not yet. Not until I start actuating the actual master cylinder. So I'm just going to use a small screwdriver and push in the piston right here. Not much. You can see it's kind of burping and shooting brake fluid up out of here. The whole point of this is to try to get as much air out of the master as you can before you install it on the car. And they have these little kits where you thread into here and the line loops over back into here and you have a continuous cycle. I've tried that also, and again, I don't like that method because, you know, what does it matter if you have it completely bled and you got this continuous cycle going of it's constantly dumping back into the reservoir? If you have to disconnect that to put it back on the car, and right there you just introduce the air into the system. You get what I'm trying to say? So I'm not going to talk about this too much. I just don't think it's as effective as people think it is. Before I do anything, let me go ahead and spray these fittings down with brake parts cleaner just to get any maybe dirt and contamination off. Now, since on the old one we know we have a leak at this seal right here, I'm trying to minimize how much I touch the reservoir. I don't want to manipulate it and start rocking it back and forth and risk of you know, damaging this seal again. So I'm trying to avoid touching this part. And this is how I build up a collection of caps and plugs. These are the two plugs that just came off of the new master cylinder, and they just get added to the collection. So we're on the front driver's side, left side once again, and even though we saw last time we cracked the valve open and there was air coming out, and we continue to do it until the air stopped, but since we opened up the system again, I'm expecting to see more air come out this thing. It's been just over like a minute and a half and we are getting a good constant drip coming out of this thing, so that's a good sign. Now, I did get inside the truck and I pushed the brake pedal, but very lightly, guys. You don't want to go ahead and floor it. You can actually damage the master cylinder like that, the new one we just put on. So I just pushed the pedal just a little bit back and forth just to get things moving and start to get that fluid moving throughout the master cylinder. And now that we got a good drip coming out this thing, I'm going to close it off and repeat the same process on the front right side. So now that I did a little bit of gravity bleeding at each of the front wheels, I want to come over to this line right here, well, both of them, and just crack them free. And we're just going to do one at a time. And I want to see if I start to get brake fluid dripping out of here. Man, it's raining hard out there. My neighbor is out there cutting his grass. That is some dedication, I'll tell you that much. So this fitting is pretty loose now, to the point where, yeah, I could turn it with my finger, and I'd expect fluid to be dripping out of here by now, but it's not. And it just goes to show how air could be trapped inside of the master cylinder. So let me try cracking this one free, see what happens. So on this fitting, we got brake fluid coming out just as I expected. That explains why we're getting fluid dripping out of the front calipers, because I believe this line is for the front calipers. So we're snug this one back up again. And this line back here is the one that goes to the rear wheel cylinders, and we are not getting any brake fluid out of here, which makes sense because I haven't gone back there yet to open up the wheel cylinder, but I guess that's going to be my next step. So it turns out I didn't have to remove the wheel. I could just reach behind it and get to that wheel cylinder. So up here, cracked it free, and then I went inside the car and pumped the brake pedal very lightly, and as you can see now, we got brake fluid dripping out of this line. So that's a good sign. That means we're actually getting fluid to go to the rear wheels. So at this point, it's just a matter of continuing to bleed at every possible location. So let me spend some time doing all of this. So the next step is going to be using my hood prop to depress the brake pedal, and just using the seat right here to keep that pressure on the brake pedal. And then with that pressure being applied, I'm going to come over here and crack each of the connections free, not only on the master cylinder, but also on this ABS unit. You can see we got like 4 or 5 lines going into it down there. So every time I crack open a line on this side, I'm gonna go back into the cabin, reapply that pressure to the brake pedal. All right, so I just finished doing the method I just told you about, and I did get some air coming out of the lines going into the ABS module. But I started up the truck and I started pushing the pedal very slowly, guys. I don't want to push it all the way to the ground, but the pedal just feels the same. It just feels very loose, so we still have a lot more work to do. I want to go ahead and try connecting a scanner to this thing, since it is a 99, and maybe we could use the scanner to try to bleed the ABS module. So inside the scanner, I did find a function that says automated bleed. Not sure what it's gonna do, but let's find out. All right, so I cleared the code and it let me get into this now. Now it's telling me to check fluid level, which we know it's fine. Set the parking brake, and that's the parking brake down there. You can see it fully pushed into the floor. I'm assuming it sees and plays anyways. That should be the engaged position, so I'm not gonna worry about that. The transmission is in park. Apply and hold brake. Pushing the brake pedal right now. It says hold brake. So I could hear the ABS module making noise up front. It says auto bleed complete. All right, and no code set. We may have to perform this function a few times. I'm not really sure how this works. I'm just trying it. Let me start up the truck, see if it made a difference. It did not make a difference. Pedal still feels like crap. All right, guys, so I'm still fighting this. We still don't have a pedal. And something I'm noticing out of the new master cylinder is, do you see that? It's actually coming from the seal right under here. Are you kidding me? So on the old master cylinder, this seal was leaking. On the new one, this seal is leaking. I'm frustrated. I got way too much time invested in this, and it seems like I'm getting nowhere. So hopefully you guys can see that trail coming right off of that like gasket or sealing surface, that O-ring inside of there. It's unfortunate. New parts, perfect example of just because it's new doesn't mean it works. So just like I first mentioned when I took this thing out the box, is I didn't want to disturb the actual reservoir because I don't want to induce a leak right here at one of these seals. And that was all for nothing because it ended up leaking anyway. I'm beyond frustrated at this point. Not only is it leaking at the master cylinder, the same exact problem that we had on the old one, but I can't get the brakes to work. The pedal is just air, nothing but air. So I'm gonna keep fighting a good battle, guys, and I'll let you know if I make any progress. All right, guys, so I found a problem. Okay, oh, first of all, I replaced this bleed valve right here. You can see it's longer than normal, but that doesn't matter. It seals 100%. The one that was on here was so rounded off, my wrench wouldn't even grab it. And I found this one in my used collection. The threads are nice and clean, and the 10mm hex on it is in perfect condition, so that's gonna work. Anyway, you know how I said whenever I put a new part on, I like to hit everything with brake parts cleaner, then compressed air, make sure it's all dry. That way I could distinguish if there's a new leak versus if the leak was already there. So when I came out this morning, I noticed that all of my connections were nice and dry, except for right here on the mount, it looked a little moist. And I thought maybe I didn't just get it that good with the brake parts cleaner and it just hasn't dried up yet. So I didn't pay too much attention to it, but that was a red flag I should have noticed. So right now I got the brake pedal depressed using my hood prop tool. And if we look back here, do you see a leak starting to develop? Because I do. And if you stay here and watch it long enough, it actually drip off. So this could be our problem right here on no matter how much we bleed the system, there's always air in the system because this line is leaking. And yes, that fitting is tight. I can't possibly get it any tighter. I already explained to you guys that none of my wrenches fit that fitting nice and snug. All of them are loose. If I try to tighten that fitting anymore, it just ends up skipping over and rounding off that thing. So I guess I could try to tighten it up, just keep working at it, see if I could get it to go a little bit tighter, and maybe that's all we need. Worst case scenario is I'm gonna have to remake this line. Thankfully it's a short line. It goes from here, I think, straight up to the master, so it's not that big of a deal if I have to remake it, but I'd rather not if I don't have to. Oh my goodness. So for shits and giggles, I decided to just come on the front right side and check this fitting. You guys see that? Right at the bottom in the same exact place. There's a little drip. Oh my goodness. And I'm telling you guys, these fittings are tight. It's not like, oh, I left it loose, that's the problem. No, these fittings are tight. All right, so I think I got both of these leaks fixed. The brake pedal is still depressed. You can see the light reflecting off of the garage door, the brake light. And if we come inside of here, you see that fitting nice and dry. Of course, after I was done torquing it down, I hit it again with brake parts cleaner and compressed air to dry it off. And that thing is completely dry. No drips coming out of it now. And all I did was come in here with my 3/8 flare nut wrench, and I really torqued down on that fitting. I mean, it was kind of sketchy. I felt like I was going to round it off, but eventually I got a hair of a turn out of it, and that's what made the difference between this thing sealing or not. So front right side, 100% done. It's not leaking anymore. Front left side was a little bit more complicated, only because we already know that that fitting, I don't really have a wrench that fits it perfectly. So the best thing I could come up with was to completely remove the retainer clip and pull the whole thing out of the bracket. Basically what we did in order to remove the old brake hose, okay? And then I grabbed the Knipex pliers once again, and I held the brake line fitting, the one I don't have a wrench for that fits nicely, and I really clamped down on it, and basically the pliers are just holding the fitting in place. And then I grabbed my 16mm wrench, and it fits perfectly right here on the new brake hose, and I held the fitting in place while I turned the brake hose onto the fitting, if that makes any sense. And I did get a small turn out of it. If we come up on the side here, keep in mind we still have the brake pedal depressed. And of course, I hit it with brake parts cleaner and compressed air. Not a single drip of anything. So I'm trying to figure out why I was having such a hard time to get the new brake hoses to seal up against the hard line. Because typically when I replace brake hoses, the one that goes to the caliper, I never have an issue with these things sealing. You just kind of torque them down like normal and they seal. So I decided to come look at the line. And guys, this right here is the factory line, but this is the line that they're using. So look, someone has ran a new line going from that caliper over to the proportioning valve up there, and this is the type of job they did. Look where it's rubbing. Nothing is retaining it, it's just hanging out. What a crap job. I don't know who did this, but they did a piss poor job at it. And if they did this poor of a job running the line, what kind of flares do you think they made at the end of these lines? So I think that's why I had a hard time trying to get the lines to seal on the new brake hoses that I installed, is because they probably put a real crappy flare on this line. Just unfortunate. I hate seeing stuff like this. I mean, whatever, it is what it is. But that kind of explains why I had a hard time to get these things to seal. So let me go ahead and put this line back in the bracket. We'll put the retainer clip back on it. Let's start the bleeding process again. So I still can't get any brake pressure out of this thing. So I'm just looking over the car, and I noticed that going to the rear brakes, we have a compression fitting right there. You can see that. And it looked like it was leaking, but I wasn't sure if it was actually leaking or if it was just from all the fluid up there dripping down the line. So I went ahead and cleaned it off, used brake parts cleaner and some compressed air. And to me, it doesn't look like it's dripping. But the point is, these things should not be on a brake system. Don't put this stuff on a brake system, guys. It's not safe. I'm gonna leave it alone only because there's no signs of it leaking right now, and we need to get down to the bottom of why the brakes don't work on this thing. So right now, that's not a concern. Another thing I noticed is these lines right here, they go to the master cylinder. You see how they coil up right there? I don't like that one bit. I don't know if that's factory or if they've been replaced before. So I'm going to use my fuel line as an example right here. And you can see I tried to like make it into a cone shape like that. So let's just say this yellow spot right here is our connection to our caliper. And this end is our connection to our master cylinder. Air gets into here where the caliper's at. It could easily work its way out. The air bubble would work all the way around these coils and work its way out of this connection at the master cylinder if you were to crack it open. It makes sense, right? Because the air is going to move to the highest point of the system. Now let's take that same concept, the same coil, and turn it upright like this. So here goes our caliper connection. If you were to get air into this system, do you see all the potential spaces for air to get trapped? And it'd be almost impossible for it to come out because air always wants to stay at the highest point. So you'll have like an air bubble right here or here or here or throughout the whole thing. And you're going to have a difficult time trying to get the air out of this thing. Whereas when it's set up like this, the air comes out with no problem. And it's why on a lot of older vehicles, and there's some even newer vehicles that I've seen it on, that you'll see that brake coils are wound up like that, but they're always wound up in this position, not this position. So that's what concerns me about these coils that we're seeing over here. I don't like that. Tell me that's not potential for air being trapped in the system. I wonder, is it possible for me to turn those coils sideways? Like not breaking any of the connections, not opening up any lines. Just simply grab that little roll of coils and turn it on its side. And if there is any air within those things down there, it'll help for that air to escape. I don't know, guys, at this point, I'm running out of ideas and I'm just trying to brainstorm and come up with whatever I could and find any potential problems. So there was two lines that the coils were facing vertical like I described, right? And so far I bent one of them. You can see now here goes the coil right here. And now instead of it being straight up and down, now it's sideways. So if air were to come in here, the air could easily work its way around this coil and come up this line. And if we come over here, you can see I still got my finger on the line, so it goes over here. And it's actually this line, it goes into the master cylinder. But the other line, it doesn't look like I have much space to go ahead and turn that whole thing horizontal. You can see there it goes right there. But all it does is connect this line from the master cylinder to this line right here on the proportioning valve. So I'm thinking maybe I could remake this line myself. All right, so we went from this to this. Simplified, guys. Why make things crazy? Well, you know, what's up with all these coils? It blows my mind. Let me not rant about this. This is a tool I use. Look at these flares, guys. Look at that perfect flare. Same thing on this side. I absolutely love this tool. It makes perfect flares every single time. This one is from Eastwood, but you can get it on Amazon. Check my Amazon link, and there's all my tools inside of there if you're interested. But yep, that big mess simplified into this thing. Let's go see if it fits on the car. I got the part installed, as you can see right there. Look how clean that looks. And don't worry, I know it looks like it's touching this line, but it's not. There is a gap. And we could probably, yeah, you can see it from this angle. So it's not touching. Look how nice that looks, guys. Perfect, simplified, and there is no way in heck that air is going to get trapped in that line. The air can easily get from here up there and escape out of that fitting if we need to crack it loose. The fact that the new master cylinder is leaking at this seal, whereas the old one was leaking at this seal, is really bugging me. So I decided to take apart the old one, and this is the seal that was sitting right here before, the one that was not leaking. So hopefully if we transfer this over to the new master cylinder, we could at least get one unit that completely works. All right, so this thing is ready to go. So this is the original seal that came with the new master, and this is the one we just replaced. And of course, when I took off the reservoir, I didn't see any damage to the seal that came off or nothing. Everything looked absolutely perfect. So only God knows why it was leaking right out the box. Anyway, let me go ahead and pop in the reservoir, because you just push it on and hopefully we get this leak fixed. And there we have it. Of course, brand new brake fluid again. Guys, I am running low on brake fluid. This truck is just eating all my brake fluid. Oh my goodness. So back to bleeding, I guess, and let's see if our leak is fixed. All right, guys, so after replacing the seals on the master cylinder last night, I decided to call it quits, and that was around 2 a.m. Yeah. So initially, I threw in the towel around 9:30, okay? Went in the house, took a shower, but then it kept eating at me, kept bugging me, so I had to come back out here. I came out around 1 a.m., and from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., that's when I replaced the seals on that master. Okay, so this morning, came out here, and nothing has changed on the truck besides replacing that seal on the master cylinder. And what I'm noticing is, after like 3 or 4 pumps, we actually build up pressure now. Granted, it's very low, but right there is pressure. That is enough to stop this truck. Before, the whole time that this truck has been in this garage, you could pump that pedal 50 times and it wouldn't make a difference. That pedal goes all the way to the floor. Basically, there was no way I was driving this truck out of this garage, because it simply just would not stop. And this right here, it's not great, but there is some pressure. So to me, isn't that kind of how it came in? Yeah, so we're back at square one, guys. That sucks, right? But at least the car will stop now, whereas this whole time it was here, it wouldn't do that. Anyway, let's go over to the master. So I've been bleeding today, right? Nothing major, just I've only been out here for like 10-15 minutes. Look at the master cylinder. Perfectly dry, not a single drip of brake fluid coming out this thing. So replacing that seal right there did fix our new master cylinder. So that's great. Finally, something positive, right? Something good is happening. I'm at the point where there's absolutely no air coming out of anything. The front calipers, the rear wheel cylinders, the lines going to the master cylinder, the lines going into the proportioning valve. If I crack open any of these bleed ports with the brake pedal depressed, nothing but straight brake fluid, not a single bubble of air. So to me, it seems like there's no air in this system. So why doesn't the pedal feel great? So this morning I did a little bit of research, and apparently these vintage of Tahoes have an issue with the brake pedal feeling spongy. And the professionals all say the same thing. It's the rear drum shoes, that they're not tight enough. They're not in the correct adjustment. They're saying that if you adjust the brake shoes right up to the point where it's just a hair away from the drum, like it's right about to make contact, it would improve the feel of the pedal. So that's going to be my next step. All right, guys, so that brake pedal pressure that I told you that we had after like 3 pumps, yeah, that was only there while the engine was off. The second you set up the engine, all that's gone. It doesn't matter how many times you pump it. There's just no feel in that pedal. So I took off the rear left drum. What I want to do is, let's go ahead and push the brake pedal and see how much these shoes actually move. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and push the brake pedal right now. That's the pedal all the way to the floor. I'm letting it go and pushing it again. That's the pedal all the way to the floor. So what we just saw, to me, that doesn't seem right, because in my past experience, if you have the drum off and you go ahead and push the brake pedal, I mean, that wheel cylinder almost wants to fall apart. It'll want to push the pistons out and the whole thing just falls into pieces, because there's that much pressure and it's trying to, expand those shoes. Whereas this is barely moving. I don't know if that's normal for this truck or if there's some sort of restriction that's not allowing brake fluid to properly come to the rear wheels. But at any rate, you can see why it's so important that the brake shoes sit very, very close to the inside of the drum, because if there's any type of gap, the pedal can only travel so much. You get what I'm saying? So let me adjust these shoes to be tighter up against the drum. So I adjusted the rear shoes as much as I could. There wasn't much room for improvement, if you will. And while I was back there, while I had the wheels off, I decided to do a little bit more bleeding at the rear wheel cylinder since I had the wheels off. And the pedal doesn't feel any different, guys. I'm starting to see why the guy was so eager to get rid of this car, that he would trade his truck and give my friend some money to, here, take the car, please take it, get it away from me. um I don't know, guys. I'm about ready to throw in the towel. It's day 3 of trying to get these brakes to work. This is absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, let's take it out for a test drive. I know the brakes aren't going to work great. I'm just going to drive around the block very slowly. I want to see if there's any improvement. If not, then I think I'm done. All right, so test drive, and no, guys, this ain't it. If anything, the brakes feel worse. I mean, it'll slow down, but that's about all you're going to get. So I just found a video online showing that there's a small valve on the side right here where the module is at. And yes, I can see it. So it's this thing right here. It's basically a small valve, and it's so that you could bleed out the system and get any air out of it. I have not tried that yet, so I'm going to try it right now. Basically, when someone is pushing on the brake pedal, you push on that valve. You treat it no different from if you were trying to bleed at the caliper. So let me see if I could get any air to come out of that thing. Okay, so pushing that valve on the side over there that I just showed you guys really didn't make a difference. I got like a steady stream of brake fluid to come out of it. Again, no air, so that's unfortunate. It's about 2 days later, and yes, the truck has just been sitting here. I just wanted to take a break from it. So a lot of you may have noticed that I just kind of glanced right over the bench bleeding of the master cylinder, and so I'm sure some of you were yelling at the screen and probably already left a comment about it. But since I'm running out of ideas, I figured, you know what, maybe there's some merit to it, and I just glanced over it for nothing, and I was wrong. So I came back to the bench bleeding idea, but we're doing it on the vehicle. As you can see, I disconnected both of the lines, and I made 2 lines coming from each of the ports going into its respective place up here where the fluid's at. One thing I did notice is that after 2 days of the vehicle just sitting here, you could see how the fluid looks noticeably darker. It was not this dark. It was like perfectly clean. This whole time that I've been bleeding, the only time I seen dirty fluid come out of somewhere was the ABS module or the proportioning valve. I keep saying that, but that's only because it's all one piece, guys. Anyways, every time I would crack one of these lines open, initially when I first started on this job, nothing but like black sludge was coming out of this module right here. So it's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, you can see this line is completely submerged in the fluid. This one is not. So I'm going to go ahead and top these off, and then we'll start pushing the pedal and see if we get any air out of this thing. I don't know. I'm out of ideas, so I'm just trying whatever I can, guys. I'm not one to give up. All right, so we're all set up here. I'm gonna go inside the vehicle, and I'm gonna push the pedal very slowly because I noticed that it does shoot like a fountain of fluid out of this port. If you push that pedal too fast, it just makes a mess everywhere. I gave it a good amount of pumps, and initially we saw a little bit of air bubbles coming out, which is to be expected because, you know, we had just connected all this stuff. I think we're done with the bench bleeding. So let's go ahead and connect the lines back together. Okay, guys, so after everything, putting the lines back on the master cylinder, bleeding at the lines, at the calipers, at the rear wheel cylinders, it's not making a difference. What's funny is that with the truck off, you know, it built up decent pressure. It doesn't feel like you're hitting a wall like it should feel like on a normal car that's not running, but there's some resistance there, you know. The thing is, as soon as you start the truck, all that's gone. all the way to the bottom. Nothing at all. I know a lot of people are going to point their finger at the ABS module and saying that this thing is bad, but look at this. To me, that looks like salvage yard writings on this thing. It seems like this thing has already been replaced also, guys. So, you know, I feel bad that I put a master cylinder on it and it didn't fix it. I don't like throwing parts at cars, guys, but I am absolutely stumped with this one. I don't know where to go next. I don't know what to do. And this is the first time for me. I've never come across a car this bad that I can't figure out what's wrong with it. It's blowing my mind. I got one more trick up my sleeve, which is this power bleeder, as you can see. And that's on the master right there. I know you're probably yelling at the screen like, whoa, why didn't you use this the whole time? Well, here's the thing. I'm aware that I have the tool, okay? It's just been in storage. And the thing is, I kept thinking about it, but I'm like, I don't have an adapter that fits this type of master cylinder. So at the very end, I decided, you know what? Let me pull the box out of storage and just look at it. And sure enough, it did have an adapter. But is it going to make a difference? Who knows? So it's what I'm doing right now. As you can see, everything is attached. I have the system pressurized. You can see it right there. And I know you're supposed to put brake fluid inside of here, but you don't have to do it like that. You could just use this as a pressurizer. So what it does is it pressurizes the master cylinder, so you could open up all of your bleed valves. And if there is any air in the system, it should push it out that way. Hope that makes any sense. So that's what I'm trying. I've always done it this way with this tool, and it always seems to work on a normal car, okay? So far, I got the system pressurized, and I open up the valves on the front calipers. No air whatsoever, just a solid stream of fluid, just like I keep getting. Let me go do the rear wheel cylinders, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same story back there. So just as I expected, the rear wheel cylinders, nothing but a stream of fluid coming out of them, no air bubbles or anything. And you can see we are still holding pressure. It has dropped a little bit, but I've been underneath the truck. I don't see anything leaking, and I'm just going to chalk that little bit of pressure that we're losing is to these things. These things typically don't get a great seal around the master cylinder. So I think that's what that is. Because if we had a significant leak, there's no way it would hold pressure like that. And for anyone wondering, so this is putting pressure into the master, and this is a vacuum. So this sucks out. It does the opposite, okay? And I have used this tool on the bleed valves just like this to suck the air out of the system. I've tried this also, guys, so it's not like I'm not capable. It's not like I don't have the tools or the experience or the knowledge. I've tried everything. I've tried everything, guys. I'm beating a dead horse here, and I just can't for the life of me figure out why the brakes on this truck don't work. So after all that work, no difference, guys. I'm only doing what 20 right now. I hit the pedal, sinks all the way to the floor, and this thing slows down at best. So it doesn't want to stop, it just slows down. That's all it does. That's it. It's getting parked. We are moving on to the next thing. Talked to my friend, and he was like, yeah, let's just move on. Everyone, I apologize for wasting your time. I feel like this was a waste of a video because we didn't get anywhere. I feel like I wasted your time and certainly wasted many hours of my time messing with this. Who knows, I may put out this video not because I fixed a problem, but more like, hey, can someone help me? Someone who has more information or knowledge about these vehicles. Maybe there's something I'm missing. I've never had this issue with years of working on cars, different cars. I've never had a brake system this bad where no matter what you do, the brake pedal doesn't work. And typically on other cars, it does turn out to be that, like, you know, there was a leak somewhere, or there was just some air in the system that was just difficult to get out. But in this case, guys, I don't believe that there is any more air in this system. There's got to be something else going on here. So I think that's what this video is going to end up being. Just going to put it out like that, and hopefully someone can help me.